Hello to all Cinemaster lovers. Hope you enjoy watching. Let's get started. The film begins with young Peter Parker in his final year of high school, where all his classmates bully him and consider him an outcast, except for MJ, whom Peter has had a crush on for a long time but has never confessed his feelings. His close friend is the wealthy young man Harry, who one day introduces Peter to his father, the tech scientist Norman Osborn. Peter says he is very interested in his research, and Norman greets them and walks away. The students have a trip to a biological research lab, and the experiments there are focused on modifying spider genes. Peter asks for permission to take pictures of the spiders because he works for the school newspaper, but he doesn't escape the harassment from his classmates, especially Flash. Harry defends Peter and drives them away, and Peter sees MJ standing alone, but he doesn't have the confidence to talk to her. His friend Harry is also interested in her and tries to start a conversation with her. In the middle of the supervisor's talk about modifying the genes of the 15 spiders present, Margin notices that there are only 14 and that one spider is missing. That spider is on the ceiling and no one notices it. When Harry leaves MJ and walks away, Peter asks her if he can take her picture and snap several shots. At that moment, the missing spider descends from the ceiling onto Peter's hand and bites him. Peter ignores it and walks away without knowing that the spider that bit him was a very rare and genetically modified species. At the same time, they are working on a new technology, which is an armed hoverboard made for soldiers to use in flying. And there is an officer from the Ministry of Defense who is funding the project, and he tells Norman Osborn that he is late in delivering the formula he promised them, which grants any human 8 times their strength. Norman says that the doctors with him tested the formula on rats and found that it gives them strength but makes them very aggressive. The officer threatens him that if this formula fails, he will take the project from them and give it to another company. Dr. Osborn decides to test the formula on himself to buy some time, and he asks another doctor to take him into the testing room and expose him to the formula. And they actually do that, but the doctor notices that Osborn starts showing strange convulsions, and then his heart stops. The doctor enters the room to check on him, but suddenly Osborn wakes up, kills the doctor, and escapes from the place. At the same time, Peter returns to his uncle's house, where his uncle and aunt live, and he feels tired because of the spider bite. He tells them he's going to sleep in his room, but he can't sleep because of the exhaustion. Due to the genetically modified spider bite, Peter's cells start to transform into much stronger cells. Peter wakes up feeling fully energized and discovers that his eyesight has become sharper and his body has developed strong muscles. He is puzzled by what happened to him. After that, he goes downstairs and greets his uncle, who notices Peter's excessive energy. Peter bids farewell to him and his uncle's wife, then leaves the house to go to school. On the way, he sees his neighbor who lives in the house next door as she is leaving, and he knows that her father treats her badly. Peter still doesn't have the confidence to confess his feelings to MJ. While he was daydreaming, a school bus passed by him without stopping, so his classmates laughed at him as usual. Peter runs after the bus, and when he bumps into it, he notices that his hand is stuck to the bus. Harry, who finds Dr. Norman Osborn unconscious at home. When he wakes up, he doesn't remember that he killed Dr. Strom, his assistant, in the research lab, and they inform him that the glider has disappeared from the lab, but Norman still doesn't remember anything. The scene shifts back to Peter at school during lunch, and he sees MJ passing by, slipping and falling, but he catches her with super speed and collects all her food with strange skill. Then he discovers that there is a fork stuck in his hand, from which threads resembling spider webs are coming out. He tries to remove the threads, but the threads stick to the food tray in front of him. When he tries to untangle it, the tray flies off and spills onto Flash, who goes to confront Peter to take revenge on him. Peter's enhanced senses help him perceive the finest details, and when Flash tries to hit him, Peter easily dodges and defeats Flash in front of their classmates, who are surprised by what happened. Peter runs away and leaves the school, reaching a side street, amazed by his new strength. He realizes that the spider bite is what gave him the superpowers. He sees small spikes starting to emerge from his hand, and he begins to climb the building in front of him with ease until he reaches the roof. After that, he tries to jump from one building to another with ease, not believing himself. He tries to shoot webs from his hand like he did at school, and he manages to grab onto a giant crane and fly to a building very far away from him. Peter goes back home afterwards and meets MJ outside the house, and he apologizes to her for what happened at school. They keep talking about their dreams after graduation. MJ wants to become an actress and leave her father's house, where he constantly belittles her, while Peter dreams of becoming a photographer. After the conversation, MJ leaves Peter and goes out with a colleague who has a luxury car, which makes Peter think about buying a used car to catch her attention. But of course, he doesn't have any money. Peter sees an advertisement for an underground fight with a $3,000 prize, so he decides to enter the bet after the power he gained. He starts designing a special suit and training to use the spider webs that come out of his hand. On the day of the fight, Peter faces a strong fighter, but Peter is faster and easily defeats him, and the referee announces Spider-Man as the winner. When Peter goes to collect the prize, the venue manager scams him and gives him only $100 instead of the $3,000 and kicks him out of the place. Peter shows anger, but he decides to let it go and leaves the place. At the same time, there is a thief entering the place where Peter was, hitting the manager and stealing all the money. The security guard asks Peter to catch the thief, but Peter decides to let him escape, telling the manager that it's not his responsibility to catch him. Later, Peter discovers that the thief he let escape is the one who shot his uncle in the street, and he sees his uncle injured and falling to the ground. His uncle dies afterward, and Peter feels a great shock and guilt. Peter starts chasing the thief using his new power, swinging between buildings with his webs and outpacing all the police cars. He breaks the thief's car window, who escapes and shoots at Peter but can't hit him. Peter confronts the thief, sees his face, and is shocked when he realizes that he is the same person who let him escape before. Peter hits him, and in the end, the thief falls out of the window and dies. Peter returns home feeling extremely guilty about what happened to his uncle, and from that moment on, he decides to use his new powers to fight crime. He starts designing a new suit for the character Spider-Man and begins fighting criminals, to the extent that newspapers start talking about the new hero, Spider-Man. People love him and start singing songs for him, and Peter feels that he finally has a role in protecting the community, but he still feels guilty about his uncle's death. The headquarters of the Daily Bugle, where the editor-in-chief, Jameson, asks the editors to find a photographer who can take pictures of Spider-Man, because news about him sells a lot of copies. Jameson also clarifies that he will tarnish Spider-Man's reputation to boost the newspaper's sales. At that time, Peter accidentally discovers that MJ works as a waitress in a restaurant, and she feels embarrassed when he finds out. He reassures her that he won't tell Harry, and he is upset because he didn't participate in the science fair due to being busy fighting crime. Osborn, the father, asks Harry to introduce him to the girl he's seeing, which embarrasses Harry because he loves MJ and is hiding it from Peter. Later, Harry asks his father to hire Peter, but Peter refuses the favor. Instead, he starts taking pictures of himself capturing criminals as Spider-Man and sells the photos to the Daily Bugle for a decent amount, and Jameson asks him for more photos. At the Osborn Company, the board of directors rejects Dr. Osborn and decides to sell the company after the festival they will organize, which makes Osborn very angry. On the day of the festival, Peter is covering the event and sees Harry standing with MJ on the balcony. But suddenly, Osborn arrives at the scene wearing an advanced suit and riding a flying board. He attacks the board members and blows up the place, and the explosion causes part of the balcony where MJ is standing to collapse, and she is about to fall. Spider-Man, Peter, moves quickly to save people and is wearing the Spider-Man suit under his clothes. He manages to save a small child from the collapse and confronts Osborn. At that moment, Osborn attacks Spider-Man and chases him on his flying board. Spider-Man tries to save MJ, but Osborn reaches him and hits him before he can rescue her. Then, he escapes the scene, leaving Spider-Man injured. Suddenly, the balcony breaks and MJ falls, but Spider-Man jumps after her and manages to save her at the last moment, amidst the cheers of the crowd watching the scene. After he lowers her onto the roof of a tall building, MJ wants to know Spider-Man's identity, but he simply tells her he's Spider-Man and walks away. Later, MJ talks to Harry about Spider-Man and thanks him for saving her, and Harry shows signs of jealousy. He goes back to Peter and tells him that he started his relationship with MJ because Peter was late in expressing his feelings towards her. At that time, Dr. Osborn starts to suffer from hallucinations, and the voice of the evil persona within him echoes, demanding that he kill Spider-Man. When Peter is in the office of the Daily Bugle newspaper in his regular persona, Osborn suddenly bursts in, breaks the window, grabs Jameson, the editor-in-chief, and asks him who is taking pictures of Spider-Man. Jameson refuses to expose Peter, but Peter quickly changes his clothes and appears as Spider-Man, spraying gas on Osborn and making him sleep. Spider-Man takes him afterwards and brings him to the roof of a tall building, where Osborn tries to convince him to join him so they can take over the world with their power, and tells him that if he refuses, he will kill him. Later, Peter notices that the newspapers are always attacking Spider-Man and demanding his arrest because of J. Jonah Jameson's plan to boost newspaper sales. Later, Peter meets MJ and asks her about the audition she did for acting, but she says she needs more lessons. Peter invites her to dinner, but she tells him she's going out with Harry. Despite that, Peter tries to get closer to her and is very nice, and MJ is nice to him and leaves. Peter then notices a few thieves following MJ and trying to bother her. At that moment, Spider-Man appears, uses his webs, and takes them down until he knocks them all down, but he isn't wearing the mask. MJ sees him, but he quickly puts on the mask, and she thanks him for his help. She wants to know his true identity, but he begs her not to ask, and he leaves. She is on cloud 9 after what happened. The next day, the city witnesses a massive fire in one of the houses. A mother pleads with the firefighters to save her son trapped inside the house. At the critical moment, Spider-Man arrives, and without hesitation, he enters the building and saves the child at the last moment, returning him to his mother. But things get complicated when a police officer arrives, wanting to arrest Spider-Man for vandalizing public property during his pursuit of criminals. And suddenly, they hear a scream from inside the house, and the officer asks Spider-Man to return to rescue. Spider-Man enters again and finds someone trapped in the flames. When he approaches to reassure him, he discovers it's Dr. Osborn, who started the fire to lure Spider-Man. Osborn asks him if he will join him as he had previously offered, but Spider-Man refuses. Angrily, Osborn attacks Spider-Man with weapons filled with blades. In his home, Osborn feels an evil control over him and begins to imagine that the suit's mask is demanding him to take revenge on Peter's aunt. He decides to attack his uncle's house and frightens his wife, causing her to go into shock and be taken to the hospital. There, she tells Peter that the attacker was a green monster with yellow eyes, making Peter realize that his true identity as Spider-Man has been revealed, but he doesn't know that the attacker is Dr. Osborn. When Aunt May gets better, she visits Peter in the hospital and tells him that she has ended her relationship with Harry and that she loves Spider-Man, who saved her life twice. Peter tells her that he knows Spider-Man because he is his photographer, and he tells her that Spider-Man told him he loves MJ. MJ feels that these words come from Peter's heart. Harry enters the room and sees them together, leading him to believe that MJ is cheating on him with Peter. After that, Harry talks to his father about his feelings and points out that he was right about MJ. At the same time, Peter is trying to contact MJ, but Dr. Osborn kidnaps her. Now, he is on a high bridge and starts destroying the bridge with bombs, while holding MJ on one side and a cable car full of children on the other. Spider-Man arrives at the scene, and Osborn asks him to choose between saving MJ or the children. Quickly, Spider-Man jumps to save MJ, then rescues the children. But Osborn tries to cut the rope that Spider-Man is hanging from. The city residents, who are watching what is happening, start throwing things at Osborn to distract him. Spider-Man manages to save the children and brings them down safely to the ground. But Osborn doesn't give up. He kidnaps Peter and throws him into an abandoned house, then throws a bomb that explodes in front of his face. Peter suffers severe injuries, and Osborn begins to assault him because he refuses to join him. At this critical moment, Peter finds it difficult to defend himself with the webs, and he feels that Osborn will kill MJ after getting rid of him. And when Peter hears this, he gathers his strength and starts hitting Osborn until Osborn surrenders. Then, he reveals his identity and tells him that the Green Goblin is the one controlling him. But at that moment, Peter is trying to move to avoid the blows, and Osborn is trying to hit him from behind. Peter feels the commotion coming from behind him, and he manages to dodge the attack quickly. Osborn discovers that he is the one who killed his father, and at the funeral, Harry tells Peter that he will take revenge on Spider-Man. At the same time, he tells Peter that he has become his whole family now. Peter meets MJ at the funeral, and she confesses to him that she loves him and that when she was about to die on the bridge, he was the only one she was thinking about. But Peter tells her that he can't be her boyfriend because he's afraid she might get hurt because of him. But then, MJ finally finds out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. The Part 1 ends. The Part 2 begins with Peter works as a pizza delivery guy temporarily until he gets a job in the photography career he loves. And MJ also worked as an actress. Peter is always late delivering the pizza, and customers sometimes refuse to pay for it because the pizza shop promises them it will be delivered within 30 minutes. But Peter always helps people on the way and is late for deliveries. The shop owner gives Peter one last chance to deliver the order, with only 8 minutes left until the deadline, or else he will fire him if he is late with this order. Peter runs with the pizza, but he knows he'll be late due to traffic, so he decides to deliver the pizza Spider-Man style. On the way, he saves 2 children who were about to cross the street from a car that was going to hit them, so he is delayed by half an hour from the scheduled delivery time. The customer takes the pizza from him without paying for it, and the pizza shop owner fires him. Even Jameson, the newspaper editor, refuses to buy photos from Peter. Peter is forced to deliver Spider-Man photos, and Johnson asks the journalist to tarnish his reputation as usual. Even at university, Peter is always late to his lectures, and the professor asks him to finish his research quickly, which Peter is doing on the tech world Otto Octavius. Peter returns home and forgets that today is his birthday, and he finds his friends there to celebrate with him. And he learns that Harry has taken over his father's company after he died, and they say they might collaborate with Dr. Octavius because they are funding projects in their company. But Harry asks Peter to find out Spider-Man's location so he can take revenge on him, since Peter is on his trail, because he still thinks Spider-Man is the one who killed his father. And after the day ends, Peter meets MJ outside the house, and they haven't seen each other for 2 years before this Christmas. He learns that she is dating someone else named John, but MJ still loves Peter, who promises to attend the play she is performing in tomorrow. And the landlord where Peter lives meets him afterward and threatens to evict him if he doesn't pay the overdue rent. The next day, Harry takes Peter to Oscorp and introduces him to Dr. Otto Octavius. Octavius is very impressed by Peter's intelligence when he analyzes his invention, which is a reactor that can generate infinite energy like the sun. And he invites Peter over for dinner at his house, telling him that he is completely in control of his reactor because Peter is skeptical about the project's readiness. And then he invites him to attend the press conference he will hold to unveil his reactor. He goes back home and puts on a smart suit to attend the theater show. Peter quickly escapes from the landlord before he asks him about the rent money, and he goes to buy some flowers within his budget to give to MJ when he sees her. He takes his scooter and heads to the theater, but on the way, there's a gang that is about to hit him with their car. And Peter dodges the car in broad daylight while the police forces are chasing the gang. And the gang destroys a police car, and the car flies towards the people in the street, but Spider-Man manages to get away from them with his webs. He then starts moving between the buildings and targets the gang's car until he reaches the car. He gets into a fight with the gang and hangs 2 of them on the streetlight pole and arrests them, but he arrives late to the theater where MJ is performing. So the receptionist refuses to let him in because he's late, and in front of the audience, MJ is very sad because of Peter's absence. He sees her leaving the theater and walking with her friend John. So Peter gets angry, dresses up as Spider-Man, and leaves the place as usual. But suddenly, while flying, his webs run out and he falls from a high place. He later discovers that his strength is declining and that he has started to fear heights again, and this poor mental state has affected his strength. So he takes the elevator down from the building like any ordinary citizen and tries to call her to apologize, but MJ is upset and doesn't answer him. He goes afterwards to attend Dr. Octavius's experiment, where he will reveal the source of the infinite energy he invented. He has invented a new machine that he considers a personal assistant, consisting of 4 iron arms connected to his spinal cord, and this machine executes his commands as soon as he thinks, as if they were extra arms on his body, not to mention that they are made of a metal that is unaffected by magnets. And he developed an advanced chip to prevent the artificial intelligence in these devices from taking control of his brain, so he remains in control of them. He then starts to operate his reactor using a rare element called and directs strong energy to this element. And a field of energy appears that resembles the sun, and his assistant tells him that the experiment was successful, and everyone present celebrates. But suddenly, the reactor generates a strong magnetic field and starts attracting all metals to it, and Octavius's wife gets scared of everyone present. After Octavius says he will take control of his reactor, Peter appears as Spider-Man and quickly saves Harry from the metals that started flying towards the reactor. But Octavius hits him before he can cut off the power to the reactor. Suddenly, the hall collapses and flies towards Rosie, Octavius's wife, and kills her. And the energy that was released destroys the chip in his head, which allows him to control the metal arms. At that moment, Spider-Man manages to cut off the power to the reactor and saves the situation, then escapes, shocked. He escapes from the journalists after Octavius's company, and there are some doctors trying to detach the metal arms from Octavius's body, but the arms start moving on their own without Octavius and attack all the doctors in the room, finishing them off one by one. Octavius wakes up and feels shocked by what happened, and then quickly escapes from the place. And suddenly, a drone destroys the car in the street before it hits Octavius, who then realizes that his invention is now controlling him, not the other way around. And Jameson, the editor-in-chief, then asks his assistant to publish news about Octavius, Dr. Octavius, or the Octopus, after he steals the name his assistant suggested. And Dr. Octavius then goes to the lab to destroy it because of him, and he wants to get rid of the arms connected to his body. But the chip that controls them was destroyed, and the arms have indeed become the ones controlling him. And she also asks him to steal money from a bank to recreate the energy reactor, and she has completely taken control of him. At that time, Peter and his uncle's wife are trying to get a loan from the bank because the house where May, his uncle's wife, is living might be seized due to their delay in repayment. But in the end, the bank employee refuses to approve the loan. At the same time, Octavius enters the bank to rob it, easily removes the safe door and takes it. Peter runs quickly before he and May get hit, and after Octavius gets rid of the guards, he starts stealing the gold and money in the safe. They notice Spider-Man behind him and start throwing bags of gold at him, but Spider-Man dodges them with his super speed, and he throws a bag of them at Octavius, but later finds that the threads in his hand have gone back to being stuck again. So, Octavius takes the opportunity, knocks him down, and then captures him to finish him off. But Spider-Man manages to free himself after hitting him with the desks inside the bank and throws him out into the street. Octavius dismantles a car in front of the bank and starts hitting Peter with it. At that moment, the police forces intervene, and Octavius takes May hostage and escapes with her from the place. He then climbs a tall building, but Peter confronts him on that building and asks him to let her go for good. And Octavius really leaves May, and she saves herself by hanging onto the umbrella she had before falling. He starts hitting Spider-Man and prevents him from saving her, and her hands start slipping from the umbrella, and she is about to fall. But fortunately, she lands on the edge of the building and doesn't fall, and Octavius grabs her again and threatens Spider-Man that he will kill her, and he has a weapon hidden behind his back to stab him with when Spider-Man attacks him. But May hits Octavius and saves Spider-Man this time, and then falls from the building, and Spider-Man jumps after her, saves her, and flies her away from the place. And Aunt May thanks him afterwards for saving her, and Octavius managed to escape with 2 bags full of gold. Later, Peter is covering a party about planetary discoveries in the solar system, and there he sees his new pilot friend John and also sees Harry, whose mental state has deteriorated significantly after his company collapsed due to the Octavius experiment. He tells Peter that he doesn't know whether to blame the destruction of his company or Spider-Man, who killed his father. And Peter is very upset and sees MJ standing alone, and she also scolds him for not attending her play even once, even though he is supposed to be the closest person to her. Peter can't find a response to her words and refuses to admit to her that he is Spider-Man to protect her. When he returns to the party, Harry's mood has worsened, and he slaps Peter, accusing him of stealing MJ from him. Not to mention that he is Spider-Man's close friend who killed his father. And Peter, whose life is ruined, doesn't respond to him, and then flies between the buildings like Spider-Man, but suddenly the webs don't come out of his hand again, and Peter falls just like it happened before. His strength fades, and when he tries to climb the wall, he falls to the ground, and even his vision starts to weaken again. So he goes to see the doctor afterwards, and the doctor says that his problem is psychological and that he needs to stop doubting his abilities. But Peter, after what happened, decides to give up his role as a superhero, throws the Spider-Man suit in the trash, and lives his life as Peter. And this time, he refuses to intervene in any problem or help solve it, even if it happens right in front of him. He excels in his studies again, and they are pleased with his performance. And Peter finally finds time to attend MJ's play, where she sees him on stage and is very happy to have him there. And she goes out with him afterwards and tells him that she is going to marry John, even though Peter tells her that he loves her, and that the responsibilities that had prevented him from being with her are over now. But MJ tells him that it's too late, leaves him, and walks away. And a janitor meeting Jameson at the newspaper and telling him that Spider-Man's suit is thrown in the trash. So Jameson tells people that Spider-Man seems to have retired, takes the suit from the worker for $100, and the news comes out that Spider-Man is no longer around. And then Peter sees 2 thieves beating up someone and robbing him, and he also refuses to intervene. And then he goes to visit his uncle's grave with Mary, and when they return home, he confesses to her that he was the reason for his uncle's death, because he let the thief escape after he stole the betting money from the wrestling ring to take revenge on the manager who cheated him out of his money. And the thief he let go after he got out is the one who killed his uncle because he wanted to steal his car. Mary is shocked by Peter, leaves him, and walks away. And at that time, Octopus has managed to build a reactor larger than the one that was destroyed before, but it is missing the material that will power it. So he goes to Harry's house and asks him for an element. Harry refuses at first, but Octavius threatens to kill him. Harry agrees to his request, which was that he bring him Spider-Man alive so he can kill him himself and avenge his father, and he tells him that Peter Parker is the only one who knows Spider-Man's whereabouts. And Peter is then in the street and finds a big fire in a house. And when he learns that there is a little girl trapped in that house, Peter enters the house amidst the fire and rescues the girl without any superpowers. And then he returns to her parents, but he learns that another young man died inside the house because no one saved him, and he feels responsible at that moment. He goes to visit his aunt, and then he finds her being evicted from the house because the bank is about to seize it. And he is helping Mary with the move, and her neighbor, the little boy Henry, who considers Spider-Man his role model, asks Peter why Spider-Man disappeared. So Peter tells him that he quit his job, and at that moment, he gets very upset, and generally, people like him consider Spider-Man a symbol of courage and hope. and Peter is very affected by Mary's words, and afterwards he tries to regain his strength again. He runs from the top of a tall building and wants to jump onto the building in front of him, but unfortunately, Peter falls from the top of the building onto his back, and his superpowers refuse to return to him. MJ, who is preparing for the wedding with her fiancé John, but MJ discovers that she doesn't love John and that she still loves Peter. So she goes to meet him at a cafe to tell him that his words last time affected her and that she still loves him. But Peter has changed his mind because he has decided to return to the Spider-Man persona and take on the role again. So he lies to MJ and tells her that he doesn't love her. In the extraordinary moment, he feels a car being thrown at them from outside the cafe. So he flies, grabs MJ, and moves away from the car that was about to hit them. And then Dr. Octavius appears, the one who threw the car at them, and he grabs Peter and asks him where Spider-Man is. He has no idea about his location, but Octavius says he's looking for him, and he says he's waiting for him at the big tower at 2 o'clock. And then he throws Peter away and kidnaps MJ to make Peter bring Spider-Man to him. And he takes MJ out to the street and runs away with her. He then gets up from under the rubble, goes out to the street, and notices that his strength has returned to him. So he goes to the Daily Bugle office and takes the Spider-Man suit hanging in his office without Johnson seeing him. Then flies off and heads to the tower where Octavius asked to meet him. And as soon as Octavius sees him, he hits him and throws him off the tower. But Spider-Man hits him with webs and grabs the giant broken clock hand, hitting Octavius with it, who then throws it back at Spider-Man. But Spider-Man grabs his webs, and both of them fall from the top of the tower, landing on the roof of a speeding train. The passengers inside the train are puzzled and don't know what's happening until Octavius hits Spider-Man and everyone sees the train. And after a long battle between them, Octavius starts grabbing the passengers inside the train and throwing them out. But Spider-Man manages to save them and hangs them with his webs in the street. Spider-Man goes to the train's control cabin, hits the driver, and increases the train's speed to the maximum. He destroys the brakes and throws the control lever to Spider-Man, saying, "Show me how you'll stop the train." Spider-Man leans his head inside the train to see the fluids he's calling for, and a small explosion occurs in his face. He then has to remove his mask and discovers that the end of the tracks is nearby, which means that if he doesn't stop the train before the end of the line, all the passengers will fall and die. So he tries to stand in front of the train and stop it with his foot, but he fails. So he gets another idea to take off a lot of the restraints from his hand and attach them to the surrounding buildings, and he actually does that. The train's speed starts to decrease until it reaches the end of the track and stops just in time before it falls, and Peter faints afterwards. And the passengers catch him before he falls and pull him inside the train, and everyone sees Spider-Man without his mask for the first time. And Peter wakes up afterwards, and people reassure him that his secret is safe. A small child comes and returns Peter's mask that fell, and suddenly, Octavius appears again, and the passengers stand in his way to protect Spider-Man, but Octavius pushes them all away with his metal arm in seconds, and Spider-Man asks them to stay away from him to protect them, and he surrenders to Octavius, who hits him and kidnaps him, taking him to Harry as he requested. Harry submits his request, and Octavius walks away while Harry prepares to kill Spider-Man, but he wants to know his identity. He removes his mask and is surprised to find out that the Spider-Man he believes killed his father is Peter Parker, his best friend. And Peter tells him that he didn't kill his father and that he will explain what happened later, and he learns from him the location of his new sister there. And Octavius really starts his experiment and has MJ tied up, telling her that Spider-Man is dead and that no one can save her now. But at that moment, Spider-Man arrives, and Octavius sees him and throws a metal plate at him. Spider-Man dodges it and asks him to shut down the power generator, but Octavius refuses and knocks Spider-Man out of the place. But he manages to come back and confront Octavius, and they start fighting. The reactor starts generating a magnetic field and pulls MJ towards it because of the chains she's tied with, and Spider-Man manages to pull her back with his web and saves her. He gets up again and hits Spider-Man, and hits MJ, and then tries to stab Spider-Man, but Spider-Man pulls Octavius's arms with his webs and makes him stab his own arms with the dagger. So, Octavius gets electrocuted, and he manages to disconnect the power from the reactor, but what happens is that the reactor keeps running and its magnetic field increases. Peter removes his mask and retreats to his sister, asking her to stop the reactor. Octavius tells him that the reactor has become self-sufficient now and it's impossible to disable it. He tries to control the metallic arms that have taken over him until he manages to overcome them. And he tells Peter that he can sink the reactor in the river and get rid of it, and he actually goes to destroy the foundations holding the reactor. Peter quickly goes to save MJ before the car falls on her, and MJ tells Peter that she suspected from the beginning that he was Spider-Man. And Peter also confesses his love to her, and he manages to save her afterward and flies away at the last moment after Octavius drowns in the river with his reactor and dies. And Peter tells MJ afterwards that he loves her, but can't be with her because he wants to protect her. And MJ's fiance arrives with the police at the location, takes MJ, and leaves. Harry, who is in his house feeling that his life has been destroyed, and the illusion makes him see images of his father in the mirror, asking him to take revenge on Peter, who he found out is Spider-Man. Harry tells them that Peter is the only one he can trust and breaks the mirror, discovering behind it the gliders and the weapons his father had hidden. And he also finds the flying board and the Green Goblin's suit he used. And it becomes clear that he wants to take revenge on Spider-Man. On the night of MJ's wedding to John, MJ leaves the celebration and apologizes to John, saying she can't continue with him. She goes to Peter and tells him she loves him, and understands the risks she might face when she gets involved with him. Peter is very happy that MJ has returned to him, and he hears a call from the police afterwards to chase down criminals, asking him to go help them and do his part. The movie starts after Peter gets involved with MJ, and then he goes to watch a play by MJ. At the same time, his closest friend, Harry, is watching the play from a higher place because he is waiting for the chance to take revenge on Peter, who he thinks killed his father. And when they leave the show, Peter sees him and tries to explain that he didn't kill his father, but Harry doesn't believe him and says he will take revenge. After that, Harry gets into his car and drives away. Harry in his father's lab, having taken a dose of the gas that gives him several times his strength, and he is preparing to take revenge on Spider-Man. At the same time, Peter is sitting with MJ in a secluded place, and suddenly a small meteor falls from the sky, landing nearby. From this meteor, a strange-looking black creature emerges and starts moving. But Peter rides away on his scooter with MJ and doesn't notice that this creature is clinging to his scooter. The prison, and someone manages to escape from prison. And then he reaches the house and enters through the window to see his sick daughter who is sleeping. And his wife sees him and asks him not to visit them again, because Flint is accused of murder and is on the run from prison. And Flint sees his daughter who has woken up and promises her that he won't return home until he gets her the money for the risky surgery she needs. Peter, who is visiting his Aunt May, and he tells her that he intends to propose to Mary Jane. And May is very happy with this news, and then gives him something that Peter had made for her a long time ago, and tells him to present it as a gift. He is on his scooter to meet MJ later in the street, and suddenly, Harry attacks him from behind with the flying board his father invented, kidnaps Peter, and flies away with him. And Peter still doesn't know that the one who did this is his friend. And Harry pulls out sharp weapons from his suit and injures Peter, who tries to hit him with his webs, but Harry hits him with his glider, and Peter crashes into a building wall and loses consciousness. And when he wakes up, he realizes that it was Harry who did this to him, and that he still wants to take revenge and kill him. So he tries to explain to him that his father accidentally killed himself while he was fighting with Peter, but Harry doesn't listen and attacks him, beating him up, and Peter is just trying to defend himself until the wedding ring he was going to give to MJ falls from his hand. And Peter can't reach the ring because of Harry's attack on him. But then, he gets into a fight with Harry and manages to knock him off his hoverboard, and afterwards, he is able to take the ring again and starts to escape from Harry to avoid getting into a confrontation with him. But Harry insists on killing Peter and starts chasing him with his hovercraft, then pulls out an advanced sword and tries to strike Peter with it. And when he fails, he pulls out a bunch of weapons like drones and directs them at Peter, who starts taking down all the drones with his webs, and grabs the last one and hits Harry with it, and it explodes in front of him. And when he runs away from the explosion, he hits the ground and falls from a high place and faints. And Peter goes down to check on him quickly and finds that Harry's heart is no longer beating, so he takes him quickly and rushes him to the nearest hospital. And there, Harry enters the operating room, and the doctors try to save him. Flint. It's revealed that Flint is the main suspect who stole the betting money back then. The police forces are chasing Link next to a physics research center in an isolated area. And Flint crosses the fence of this center and hides in a place filled with sand where the researchers conduct experiments to extract silicon. And the scientists at this center don't notice his presence in the place, and they start their experiment. And a strange device appears, starting to spin rapidly around Flint, who is trapped on the sand and unable to escape. And the device starts altering the composition of his body's cells, which begin to transform into ghostly crystals of sand grains. Flint's body then fades away and turns into sand, disappearing among the sand present in the area. Harry, who is in the hospital, and the doctor later informs Peter that Harry has temporary amnesia. And when Peter sees Harry, he doesn't remember anything about the incident except that he completely forgets he wanted to take revenge on Peter. And in the research lab where he disappeared, the sand's starting to gather inside the place that his body has become part of. And then he starts to get up with difficulty after the experiment changed the cells of his body into sand grains, and he is able to take his daughter's necklace, which has her picture on it, with difficulty. He then returns to his normal form and leaves the place after gaining superhuman strength. And Peter is at home at that moment. She visits him and tells him that all the points in the newspapers have labeled her a failed actress. So Peter tries to console her, but then he hears a police call on the radio, so he puts on his Spider-Man suit, leaves MJ, and heads out. And that's because there's a giant crane, and its driver lost control of it, and the crane starts destroying a tall building where a girl named Gwen Stacy is filming an advertisement. She happens to be the daughter of Captain Stacy, the head of the police department, and also Peter's classmate at university. And at that moment, she is about to fall from the part of the building that was destroyed. There is a photographer named Eddie, who works for the Daily Bugle newspaper, capturing what is happening. He meets Joan's father at that moment and tells him that he is in a relationship with his daughter. And Spider-Man arrives at that moment, flying towards Gwen, who is falling from the building, but Spider-Man manages to save her before she falls and lands her safely on the ground. She goes to her father afterwards, and Eddie starts taking pictures of Spider-Man and tells him that he is the new photographer at the newspaper because Peter is an amateur to him, and Spider-Man leaves him afterwards. Eddie takes the photos and goes to the Daily Bugle newspaper to sell the photos to Jameson, the editor-in-chief. And then he arrives too and tries to sell Spider-Man photos to Jameson. So, Jameson, who can't stand Peter, prefers to take Eddie's photos and wants to give Eddie Peter's job as well. But in the end, he tells them that whoever brings him the best Spider-Man photos will win the job. And Eddie tells Peter that he will get this job no matter what. And there will be a celebration for Spider-Man soon, but the daughter of the city's police chief, Peter, later with Harry, who has been discharged from the hospital, and he notices that Harry still retains his superpowers due to the serum he was exposed to. But Harry doesn't know the secret behind his strength. They replace Harry in the play with another actress, so she leaves the theater very frustrated, especially when she sees the big celebration held for Spider-Man, because at that moment she feels jealous. And she meets Peter afterwards, who is getting ready to appear in his Spider-Man costume at the party held in his honor. And suddenly, Eddie is also there and meets Peter, and she tells him that just because she had a cup of coffee with him before doesn't mean she loves him. At the same time, Peter is walking down the street, and the police recognize him and start to chase him away. He ran away from them and hid in a sand truck parked on the street. Two officers climb onto the car to search for him, but suddenly they find that Flint has